Hello and thanks for joining us once again on Fox Sports Lab NFL. We're up to week 7. It's been a very interesting season so far. Jaymz Clements has been right across it right throughout day one. Jaymz, hello to you as always. Before we get into what happened in week 6, you've been to see one of your favourite bands last night.
I am feeling a little bit dusty today, Matty. This is what happens, midweek shows. It's a bit hard, but one of my favourite bands of all time, Descendants, were out. Good to see just a bit of SoCal punk rock on a Wednesday night. Nothing quite like it, but awesome band and stoked that, look, we're a third of the way through the season. It's kind of weird. It's kind of amazing. We still don't know too much, though, but we know enough to know what we don't know, Matty.
That's exactly right. Let's just quickly talk week 6 then. We saw the no more undefeated teams. We saw the Eagles go down to the Jets, who are now 3-3, and we saw the 49ers go down, which we didn't expect, to the Browns at home.
Yeah, the Browns one wasn't a giant surprise because that line sort of stuck around that 8.5, 9.5 point mark. And I was actually on the Browns, I think, last week to sort of at least make that interesting. That defense is always going to give teams real worries. But I think this is kind of the thing, right? We've talked about this before. Are there any good teams, Matty? We've got basically a top tier of teams, I think. But now we've got no one undefeated. So the 72 Dolphins are safe once more. One more year under the bag. Good on them. But I think you saw Philly's weaknesses with Lane Johnson going out injured. Like suddenly there's not much room or time on that offense, and that secondary can be exploited, which we'll get to when we talk about this amazing game coming up this weekend. And the Niners, same sort of thing. You cup a couple of injuries and suddenly it all goes pear-shaped. But I still think they're obviously one of the top 5 teams. Well, those two are two of the top 5 teams in the NFL. I think KC, Miami, and Buffalo are still right there with them. But there's a lot of middle room still. Like everybody else seems to be basically like 2-3, 3-3, 3 and that's all it is at the moment. So there's a big creamy middle at the moment, Matty.
And we're in the middle of the season, and a lot of those games last week went unders. So at the moment, after the opening couple of weeks, defense is on top.
That's it. It's like one of those things. I've talked about this before, how it feels like the first 4 weeks of every season now are basically an extended preseason, and the defenses are really good for those first 2 weeks. Then the offense, finally adjusts, and then the defense adjusts to the adjustments. You love that. I love a good readjustment to an adjustment. And so the defenses last week were absolutely dominant. I think we had 13 unders hit. And this has been one of those sort of trends where this is still really nice weather in the States. It's still October. It's still nice, that beautiful fall weather. But the unders are hitting because the defenses are just sort of scheming. And I feel like what we're seeing as well, there's not too many good quarterbacks out there. I feel like we come into every season going, everybody's got a QB. And it turns out only about maybe a third of the actual, teams have a half decent, signal caller back there. And that's why the defenses are really sort of running rampant.
All right, let's get to Thursday night footy, Friday morning our time. And we've got the Jacksonville. The Jags are back from their trip overseas. They're 4-2. They're playing the Saints, who are at home, who are 3-3. The Saints have a spread of -1.5.
Yeah, that was a weird one last week because Jacksonville came back from the UK, didn't take their bye. So 2 weeks in London, they come back. No problems. They beat the Colts. And I'm like, I was surprised by this. I thought there'd be a little bit of a letdown. They shellacked them. So the tricky one was as well, New Orleans, they didn't look great. After beating the Pats 2 weeks ago, they turn around and lose to Houston, I think it was. So weird sort of setup going to this Thursday night game. But what we have seen from the New Orleans Saints is that all of their games go under. We talk about unders. We're going unders again here, Matty.
No adjustment needed.
No adjustment. We're just going with the unders again. 41.5. I think it's 12 straight games that New Orleans matches have actually gone under the total points line. I'm still going to lean with the Jags +1.5 as well at the moment because even though Trevor Lawrence copped a bit of a knee knock, all sort of indications have it that he will probably still get out there. And even if he doesn't, I still think they can grind this one out behind Travis Etienne and stuff. But the thing for me, looking at a same game multi for this one, is that the Jags still have the second worst passing defense in the NFL at the moment. So probably look at someone like Chris Olave, who's been pretty boom or bust. He's gone for over 86, I think, in 4 of his 6 games. And 60 plus for him feels like very, very doable against this Jags defense. And same thing goes for Calvin Ridley. I'm going to probably leave him at about 40, 45 yards because the Saints secondary can be pretty tough. And if you don't have Trevor Lawrence, but Ridley will be a big part of this because in the past when he was on the Falcons, Matty, he tore up the Saints. So I love Ridley against the Saints. I think he went for 90 plus yards in each of his 3 games against them in the past. So if we look at just Olave as a receiving yards marker at 60, Ridley the same thing at about 40, 45. And the Jags plus 1.5 and an under, I think that's where I'm going to play this one. It goes about $9.50 as well. And it sort of just leans into the, a receiver on both sides, and then you result in the under.
All right, let's move to Sunday night games, Monday morning our time. I'm very interested to see where your multi goes this week, because there's a couple of cracking games with small spreads, a couple of tight ones. In particular, the Lions-Baltimore game is an absolute ripper with the Lions 5-1. They're at Baltimore, and Atlanta-Tampa Bay is close. And then, of course, we've got the Dolphins at Philly, both 5-1. So, very keen to see whether you want to steer clear of these sort of close games.
I think I'm going to steer clear, like Detroit and Baltimore. So I talk about a top 5, teams in the NFL at the moment. Detroit and Baltimore are both knocking on that door, right? Yeah. Like they're right there, probably 6 and 7. I'd have them in my power rankings. But I think I want to steer clear of that just because you've got a Detroit team on the road, Jared Goff outside again. They were in Tampa Bay last week. They had no problems really there. But this is a completely different kettle of fish, right? It's the Ravens. It's outside. I just don't want to it's hard to get a read on that one. So I'm going to steer clear of that for the multi. What I will go is that Cleveland Brown defense to step up once more against the Colts. I feel like the Colts, they've lost 7 of 8 at home. So I'm going to lean on Cleveland to cover that line of -2.5. Buffalo to beat my beloved Patriots because, well, Mac Jones might be the worst quarterback in NFL, Matty. He is horrible. As the French say, les horrible. And like Buffalo -9.5. I love that. They're going to kill the Pats, even in Foxborough. And then Seattle -9.5 over Arizona. That's an NFC West sort of battle. Seattle look to bounce back. And then the Steelers +1.5 against the Rams. This is a good one. This one get it over $15. I think the Steelers defense will be too good for the Rams.
Yeah, Steelers D's going all right. I'm not going to talk about our offense. There's nothing there at all. But TJ's having a beautiful season as always. Let's go to Tuesday morning game. The 49ers, they want to bounce back against Minnesota, who lost their first 3. They've won 2 of their last 3, but they've lost all of their games at home. And San Francisco has some injury concerns like yourself. You're just trying to readjust here. But how did you see this one?
This is a weird one, right? So you've got Niners, Vikings. This Addison feels like he's taking over for Jefferson, and Brandon Ayuk's gonna have to stand in for a lot of these weird sort of McCaffrey injuries. Debo may be out. Purdy's still playing pretty well, but I think the Niners at the line is probably where I'm going to land, and over 50.5 because I think there's going to be a lot of points in this game. Minnesota, their defense has been very, very weird and up and down, and the Niners can put on 30 on pretty much everybody that isn't named Cleveland at this point, right? So I think that's what we're going to do. We'll go for the Niners for 30+. I think the Vikings can at least get the ball moving a little bit behind Kirk Cousins, but I still think the Niners should cover this line. I think Addison gets in. I think Ayuk gets in. And I think we see this one go over. But the Niners will probably try to reassert themselves. Even on the road, I think they're still too good, and I think they'll be way too tough for this Minnesota team. And, it's a pretty weird matchup because Minnesota, you just don't know what to expect from their week in, week out. But Niners will be too good.
All right, mate. So Niners to be too good on a Monday night footy. Thank you, sir, as always.
Thank you, Matty. And look, I can't wait for this Miami-Philly game, to be honest, on Monday morning. That's awesome. Like, if we're going to have a game, it'll be this one for this week. It'll be massive.
Imagine what you could be buying instead. For free and confidential support, call the number on the screen or visit the website.